So hey Megan, what's up?
Just chilling.
Just chilling. It's a
How are you?
Friday. I'm okay. We're both like taking our low. Actually, Megan's done for the day. I'm taking my break from work and I'm going to Europe tomorrow. So I'm just been packing, getting ready for that. That's my life. One of my friends who's also going to Europe still decided to plan one of our other friends going away party tonight. So I guess I'm about to make an appearance at that, but thankfully our flight is later tomorrow, and so we're meeting our group at like 4 p.m. tomorrow. So I kind of have the morning at least if I have anything last minute I need to do. So yeah,
Are you excited? How are you feeling? Nervous?
I'm nervous and excited. I feel a little more prepared now, so I feel less nervous about it, but I definitely still a little nervous, but I think it'll be fine. I am
I
really
feel like I'm
excited.
always nervous to fly, like no matter where I'm going.
I'm just nervous to travel internationally because I never have. Um,
Mm,
and I don't know, I feel like you have all these like expectations for a trip, and I'm trying to like let that go because I'm like, is it gonna be like this? Or I want everything to be like this. And I'm just trying to like give it to Jesus and let it go. And it's a pilgrimage, so it should be focused spiritually anyway. So I just need to chill, pretty much, which
something you
I'm
and I
not
are like really,
really
really
chill.
good at.
Yeah.
I would say that's one of our strengths is
Uh-huh. It's just
relaxing and not
yeah.
being anxious.
Being chill, just not really caring about what happens, fully trusting in the Lord, just like
Yeah,
really chill.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We're
definitely not
examples
actually.
of what you would want to be.
That's
What's
actually
an
how Megan
example of
and
what
I
you
kind of
wouldn't want to be?
related.
Yes, on topic. Today, I thought it would be fun if we talked about kind of how we met, how we became friends, and on that, how to be friends with someone who has very different beliefs than you.
I should say very
Kind of
different.
along yeah, I guess very different. There's a lot of common ground, but like ecumenical dialogues, how to have them in like a friendship sort of context.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, Megan and I met. We might have talked about this way back, but some of you might not have been listeners back then. And one of the very first episodes that we did, we both worked at an organization here, a nonprofit here in Chicago. And Megan at the time was working on the client side, and I was working on the admin side. Um, but I would work like in the same office area though. So that's how we ended up meeting. What I don't was it right when I started? I guess it was kind of like,
so
was it
okay. My first memory of meeting you was when our boss like literally like paraded you around. Was like, everyone, this is Jackie. She's the new hire. And we were all like, oh hi. And I remember I was like, oh, that's funny because we had gotten like an email like the week before, like announcing that you were starting. And I just assumed you were a man
oh
because of how your
right.
name was spelled. So when I saw you, I was like, oh no, it's a pretty lady instead.
I do not remember that being taken around. I don't
I
remember
didn't
that at
say
all.
that. I just remember you walking around
Well,
the
yeah,
like center and yeah.
but I have no memory of that or like meeting you then. That's all. I probably because I was just learning so much at once and I was overwhelmed. So I have no memory of that. Also, yeah, I had no idea they'd sent out an email, so that's funny. Yeah, that's fun.
And then I
I
remember
remember
because you
my
would
first
work in the
day.
same location as me like once a week. And
Yeah.
so there was like we started seeing each other like once a week.
Well,
And we
then
can get into that a little later, but
I was there way more often. That was like twice a week. Uh, because the admin person that was supposed to be downtown more often got let go. So I started doing kind of like both her role and my role. Classic small nonprofit. And yeah. So at least like November to like December, I was kind of downtown more. And my first memory of Megan was I don't know if it was, I think it was before, because there was a really funny memory, but she was really good friends with one of the other like client advocates that I had gotten actually closer to, Allie. Shout out to Allie. And I was having a really tough time in my personal life. I think it was something with a boy, as you know, as it always is. And I was complaining or like having a hard time and complaining to Allie about it. Actually, I was opening up about something that I think maybe that kind of was like, I don't know, serious that happened. I don't remember. And Megan was just sitting there. And I was like telling the
We can cut this
story.
out. We can cut this out if you don't want it in. But wasn't it about you getting hit by a car?
Oh,
You
yeah.
can cut it out if you don't want that in there, but
That's okay. I think that was part of it. Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much that happened. It was a wild time. Yeah, I was telling you about that, and then something else happened. My life was a hot mess express. Um, that was rough. And then the second time I remember is I think I literally had like a panic attack because my life was such a mess on the train. And I came in and I was like, oh, I just had a panic attack. I'm doing terribly. Megan's like, can I get you water? Can I get you something? I like didn't know Megan at all. And I was just kind of like, sure. But yeah, Megan and I didn't really talk. She would just kind of like comment like a little bit on things, like when Allie and I were talking. But what was your impression of me?
no, I do remember the whole panic attack thing, and I remember just being filled with like utter empathy because I was like, oh my gosh, like me every other day. And so I like felt really bad, but I didn't want to like come on too strong. So yeah, I just remember being like, oh, I'm sorry. But then I ended up getting transitioned to the admin side. So I took over the person's job that you had been sort of filling in for. And so then we started working like together more often. And I remember like within the first week of my transition, I like made some mistake or like did something and I was like really stressed out. And I remember we were sitting at that table in the office and I looked at you and I was like, I'm just gonna cry really quick, but like I'm fine. Just like don't worry about it. And then I just like sat there and like cried. You were just like,
I think I was like, it's okay, like it's gonna be fine. And I was like, I can help you if you need me to like read off numbers or something like that. But it was so funny because I'm like
so
trying to
very
comfort
early on,
you.
you and I both had like meltdowns in front of each other. The other person was like, it's good, girl. You're fine.
Yeah, I was like totally chill. It was nice because it was like would go back and forth between me being really chill and you being like, everything's fine. And then me freaking out. And yeah, yeah.
That was the
That
sort of
was
the theme of our
funny.
entire work friendship there. Was just
Yeah.
taking turns.
Yeah. And then when we weren't working at the same location, we would just like talk on the phone the whole time. Because we were like, I would working in an office where there was really nobody there. And same, she would be kind of be just working alone. So yeah. That was a very interesting time in our lives. We worked together for like a year and a half, I think. I feel like. I don't, yeah,
Mhm,
yeah, yeah.
mhm.
But I don't remember when we like actually were like, oh, we're real friends.
I
I didn't,
think
it
it
just
was
kind of
COVID.
happened. But I feel like we'd become like better friends before them, but I don't think we like hung out outside of work. Because you invited me to your Super Bowl party, and then I was like, oh, I'm going to a different party. But thanks like for inviting me. But you had invited me to that, and that was January.
Yes, and I think at one time I was like bored and I was like, hey, if I hopped on the bus like and went over like to where you were at, like would you want to hang out? And we just like talked for like an hour and then I was like, okay, bye. And then I left.
Yeah. I don't, yeah, I don't, oh my gosh.
So it
Yeah.
was like yeah, I think it was a slow thing because we were like seeing each other at work and we like got along super well and like liked being around each other, but I don't feel like it was until like COVID started and we were like, oh, we're in each other's quarantine bubble because we both have to work together, that then we were like hanging out almost on like a daily basis.
And I could go to your apartment easily because I could just take the bus. Because we both lived in the west, like more west side of Chicago. So yeah, and the buses were still running, or I could take an Uber, but the buses were like nobody was on the buses, and so I could just like take the bus to you, or you could come pick me up because I was not that far from you. So yeah, and that's when we started. I don't even remember what it was, but was it like August maybe or not August, April? When I was like, oh, I got the idea for the podcast, and I was like, I just feel like we would do great doing a podcast together and we could talk about certain things. And we didn't start that we would talk about our differences though. We didn't even think that that would be a part of it. It was mostly mental health or like dating or marriage. I was like, I feel like we have different perspectives on things just because we're in different states of life. Yeah, and then I was like, you should pray about it, and you prayed about it, and then we made like the first week, like an entire like 17 episode ideas. But we were like, oh, well, every once in a while maybe do like talk about our differences, but now it's become like a way bigger part of our podcast, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like it did kind of start in a sense because we were like, oh, wow. Like I think we both recognized in the other person that they were willing to like talk about stuff that was like sort of taboo. Like I opened up to you about the fact that I was struggling with anxiety really bad, and that was like right
Oh
around the
yeah.
time
Yeah.
when like things were really, really bad for me. And you were like, hey, you know what? I struggle with this too. And I'm actually on medication. Like, would that be something you would think about? And it really wasn't until you brought it up to me and I saw like, okay, well, Jackie's on medication. She's okay. Like she's, doing better. That I was like, I think I'll go to the doctor. I think I'll like have a conversation. Um, and that was like what really early on. And so we sort of like I think just bonded and got like very like we trusted each other a lot because we were like,
Yeah.
hey, listen, you have a lot of dirt on me.
Yeah, or we just related a lot we're like, yeah, I struggle with anxiety too. We had similar personalities. We had the same sense of humor, which sometimes I'm like, Megan and I are so funny. And then other people are like, like don't really get what we're talking about or think that certain like voices or things that we do are funny, and we think we're hilarious. So and I still think I'm universally funny. I think Megan is too. So whatever. Anyone that disagrees. Yeah. And I remember we were both back with the Enneagram, which that's controversial now, I guess, believing in the Enneagram, but
Oh yeah.
we're both four. We had different wings, which actually makes a lot of sense. I'm a wing 5 and Megan's a wing 3. And yeah, that was another thing. We're like, oh, we're like very similar. And I don't remember when it was I first came over. Maybe it was March, because oh my gosh, I know what it was. I made you film me. This was
Oh,
before we even thought about the podcast. I was like, Megan, do you think you could like film me? My
yeah.
church, throw back to COVID, did this series of like people hitting on different pillars in our church, which was like I don't know. I don't even know what it was, but they had someone do a video on like how to cook during quarantine or like meals and then working out during quarantine. They were kind of funny. And then mine was more serious. That was like how to pray during quarantine or like keep up your prayer life. And I came over and made Megan film me. And someone else had written the whole script. Well, they didn't write the whole, they like took what I wrote and then kind of like made it funnier at the end or something. Yeah. So that was something. Just on your iPhone. You filmed me.
I do
I
remember
think it was
that,
like my
yeah.
first time meeting John. He was like barely even there. And I was like, hey.
Yes,
That
oh
was
my gosh, that
funny.
was so funny.
Yeah, I would just come over and hang out. And then that's when we were like, oh, we should start a podcast. And then we went and bought all the stuff for it. I remember that. That was
You know
interesting.
what
We
I
had to
think it
stand in
was? How
line.
it because at work, you and I would listen, like when we worked in the
Oh
same location, we would
yeah.
just like put something on to listen to while we worked because we were both just doing like very tedious, like administrative things on our computers. So we would listen to like podcasts, we would listen to YouTube videos, but we started listening to more like Catholic Protestant sort of videos. So like we would listen to Matt Fradd videos.
Yeah.
We found Austin Suggs and we would start listening to his channel. And like then we found Gavin and we listened to all of Gavin's
Yeah.
videos. And so that
Yeah.
I feel like that's what started even sparking conversations between us too, because we'd be listening to these videos and then we'd pause and we'd like ask each other questions or
Yeah.
start like
Yeah.
discussing it or talking about it or being like, oh, well, that person like isn't really representing that correctly. And they'd be like, oh, well, what do you like, what believe? And then we would go back and forth. And I feel like that was in the midst of us sort of planning the podcast. So that's when we were like, what if we did an episode talking about sola scriptura? Because that was something we had been talking about a lot. And Mary. And those were like two of the first Catholic versus Protestant things.
That we did. Yeah. And we also listened to the podcast The Place We Find Ourselves. And that's where we were talking a lot about mental health and our trauma and attachment styles and different things
Yep.
like that. And yeah, that was fun. We just realized we had the same interests in things. We're like, we want to talk about these things and we enjoy talking about them. And we feel like we can bring an interesting perspective to certain things, like because we both will talk about it. We're open and willing to talk about things. And then also coming from the perspective of being a Protestant and a Catholic, I thought that was cool. And yeah, just being in different states of life. I was like, I can talk about being single and dating, and Megan can talk about being married. And that was part of our first episodes too, was like singleness advice when you're single. And at the time I'd never been in a relationship at all. I just kind of like dated, had situationships, I guess you could say. But even that, they weren't very long. So yeah, that was a different time. That was such a different time in life. It's so crazy to look back. Everything is so drastically different. I feel like I'm a totally different person. And I've had so many different experiences. And Megan's a mom and has a baby who's almost a year old now. Shout out to Cece. And Megan
Yeah, I
moved.
know.
I
It
moved
feels
since
like it's
then.
been so long. When what? It's been like 3 or 4 years, but
It's been a long life
some
has changed a
jam-packed
lot.
years.
Yeah, and COVID was just like, oh, yeah, we have different jobs now. We don't work together. We don't live in the same city anymore. So we had to learn how to record separately, which was a change. Yeah, it's been quite a journey. But I feel like something that people might be interested in is, how do you keep such a good friendship when you have disagreements on theological things? And then some of them I guess are pretty big. Like I don't think I've hit it at all, or it's at all not obvious to people that I am a big Mary stan. I have a huge Marian devotion. We've talked about it on our podcast. I'm literally going to a Marian apparition site, Lourdes, in Europe. And that's something that obviously, that's like, I feel like one of the number one things that Protestants really disagree with. Some of them find it very problematic, maybe more than Megan would. Yeah, I just have very different views on that. But that's something that Megan is not at all interested in, or like would, but it's a huge part of me and something I like talk about a lot. So it's not like we hide our differences or hide parts of ourselves, because that could be like, you could be friends with someone and just like, well, I'm not going to bring that up, or I'm just not going to talk about that. And then I just kicked my camera. And it's hilarious because if you watched the last episode, literally, I think Our Lady of Guadalupe just like
You're just trying to
wanted
rub
to.
it in my face.
Okay. So anyway, so we're just kicked my stand, and we're just gonna see what. um, okay, things are just going.
No.
My camera. I was having issues before this too. Okay.
This will be a new series.
1 moment later. Okay. Oh my god. How's that? Is that good enough? That's good, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, am I like kind of turned a little bit?
Maybe a little.
Whatever, it's fine. The audience will understand that I just whatever. So Our Lady of Guadalupe just really wanted to be in the shot. She really wanted to be in there. Okay. What was I even saying?
Oh, we don't hide our differences or like choose not to talk about topics, because that's something I know people have talked about when they have friendships like across political lines. Is they'll be like,
Mm,
oh, you can't bring up politics, can't bring up politics. And I feel like a lot of our conversations are around faith because that's like the most important thing to us.
yeah. And we do find common ground. Like we will pray for each other. We both believe in Jesus. We both believe in the power of prayer. We both will have similar values of like social issues. We have very similar views on. That's true. I guess that does help, is that we're both pretty like moderate politically. Um, we don't totally agree on everything. I guess it's just like we know that we have mutual respect for each other, and we're also, I mean, it helps that we don't think the other person's going to hell, right? That helps, because
Yeah.
if Megan were to think that because I'm Catholic, or I were to think because she's Protestant that her salvation is on the line, that may maybe make it a little bit harder to be super close friends. I don't know.
And I think a core thing that makes it work is if you're both just upfront that you're not going to try and convert the other person.
Yeah.
I think if there's any sort of deceit in like an intention, there's just a lack of trust there. Whereas you and I, obviously, we joke about it all the time, but at the end of the day, we're not out. Like, our goal in having a friendship is not, well, I hope, I can finally get through to her. That's just like not the mindset we're in. Whereas if I was like a Mormon and you were a Catholic, that would be different because at the end of the day, like there is an element where you're like, oh, well, I do like want her to, like, you don't wouldn't think I was saved or a Christian. Whereas you and I can both agree, like, no, we believe the other person is Christian, we just believe they're wrong about certain things. So I
Yeah.
think it would be a different sort of relationship or friendship, not an impossible one, if we didn't have that common ground of like a shared affirmation that the other person was a Christian.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I have friendships with people that are, I obviously am friends with people. Like one of my friends growing up from high school is Hindu, and I have other friends that just aren't religious, wouldn't identify as Christian, or yeah, just chilling. I don't know. Spiritual or maybe agnostic. And I think, I don't know, I think maybe it just helps that we were together for so long, literally like in proximity, but we also just our personalities really meshed well. So that also helps to have a lot in common. But I do think we can talk about what really matters to us on a deep level and essentially like agree. I don't know. I can really like open up to you about what I'm dealing with and you can pray for me, or we don't have to like hide certain things about ourselves to the other. And so that helps you to be really close friends. I don't know. Yeah. And it helps that I don't know, you also, so like Megan buys me Mary things sometimes, which is nice. Or she came to this talk that was on Our Lady of Guadalupe because she was interested in learning about it. Like, and I wasn't thinking, oh, Megan's gonna show up to this and then she's gonna convert. Like I wasn't after like, okay, Megan, like, so what do you think? Or like hoping at that then it would convince you. It was like, no, I'm just genuinely like interested in going to something because I care about you and want to go with you, because I think I was like, Megan, will you go with me? I don't want to go alone, or because there was something I wanted to go and I didn't want to be the only one to show up alone. I don't know. And you went because you cared about me and thought that knew that it mattered to me. So you went and were like respectful about it. And we were able to talk after. We did a podcast on it about like things that you were concerned about or that you didn't agree with. And yeah, I don't know. I think it helps that we both care about the other. Like I visited Megan's church. I was interested in like hearing more about her church and about her faith. And we interviewed your pastor's wife. And actually I would love to interview your pastor. Like there's just a lot of mutual respect, I think. And like I'm totally open to hearing from Protestants having on the podcast. Same with Megan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Megan came to my Catholic women's group. So she's obviously not going to sit there and like pray a Hail Mary with us, but she also is not going to be like, oh, I gotta leave. Like, this is terrible. I don't know. So we're not antagonistic to the other person's
Mm.
faith. That makes a big difference because I have dealt with that and that's rough. If someone's constantly making little digs, like seriously making digs. Of course, Megan and I joke all the time, but we know that
Yeah.
the other person does not mean it. Like we always make a joke. My Riley is really funny. We had her on the podcast too. She actually used to be Protestant and became Catholic, but she and I always joke like, yeah, it's just a shame that Megan won't be in heaven though. Like it's just a bummer. And that's funny. Or Megan will say things like, yeah, too bad she's not saved. I don't know. Like just funny things like that. But if you're actually genuinely like making digs at the other person, yeah, that's not gonna work.
I would describe our position towards each other as I can't speak. Curious instead of antagonistic. You and I both have this like genuine desire to understand the other person and understand like what they think,
Yeah.
what they believe. Because even early on, when we would find something that we like disagreed with, or I was like, oh, I actually really don't think that's right, you didn't respond by like shutting down or being like,
Oh,
oh, well, you know what I mean? We're instead like went into it with curiosity, like, okay, well, let's like figure out like what is like the core disagreement here? Where like what is that gap? What are things we can do to bridge that gap? Where is the common ground? Like, what do we agree on? What do we disagree on? And I think that is a core element of it too, because if we were antagonistic or just shut down instead of having those conversations, it would be a totally different sort of relationship. So, like, you know exactly where I stand. I know exactly where you stand, which means I'm totally comfortable, like, coming to your Catholic women's group. You're totally comfortable coming to my church's women's ministry event because we both know the other like what the other person's intentions are, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and there's no like hint of animosity or spite or pettiness or anything like that. It's we just genuinely want to understand and we want to, because I think we recognize like this is both something that is extremely important to us. It's a core part of our faith, and we care about the other person, so we want to understand and we want to be a part of that, even if we don't agree.
Yeah, I agree because even if like I don't know, I've been not been in friendships or like been in situations where it's like the other person is not even willing because they care about me to like learn more about it or like come to an event, or it's like I'm not trying to make you be Catholic by you coming to this event, or even mass. Megan's come to mass with me, like coming to mass with me, or it's like you just sit there and you're respectful and you're there. You can even just be there because you care about the other person and know that it's important to them. So you're just there with them. And that's like I remember when it was the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe last year, and I was upset that somebody wouldn't come with me because they were not Catholic, and it just really mattered to me, and it just felt like it was sad to me that not that they weren't Catholic and not that they didn't agree, but that they didn't care enough that they would bring me since I had no one else to go with or I couldn't go. And I remember Megan saying like if I was there I would go with you, just because she knew it was important to me. Like she would go with me and she'd be interested, like she wouldn't sit down and pray with me or like, but she just, because she cared about me and respected me. And I think that's a really cool part of our friendship, is like I think you said it perfectly, that we just, because we care about the other person, we're open to learning and understanding what the other person believes and even like experiencing it with them, even if we're not necessarily like open to that we're going to change our beliefs, or but it's just like you want to understand the other person better because you respect them. And there's been a lot of benefit in that for us. Like we've also had I have a much better view of like the Protestant faith because of being friends with Megan and actually genuinely understanding things that they believe and not caricatures, which we've talked about. And I know it's like, but it's vice versa. So it's been very beneficial. But I think it's because it came from that place of like genuine respect and like wanting to learn and wanting to understand the other person, not to fight them or change them. Um, because that would be, yeah, that'd just be uncomfortable if I constantly felt like Megan was trying to change my mind or like present things to me. Even like if I've sent you, I don't know, sent you things like, oh, what do you think about this? Like genuinely, like an argument for a Catholic position. It's because I want to hear what you think about it, not because I'm like, oh, I bet this will change Megan's mind. I don't know.
And I've also brought things up like, is would this be an objection or would this be like, and we've had those conversations, but I would say one, I think it's a benefit of our friendship. Something that has benefited me is having like a very deep appreciation for the Catholic faith. Like I find it very beautiful. I find it very commendable. I have a huge respect for it. Like so I'm not going to mass with you. Like, I'm just here to support Jacque, but I hate this
Yeah.
either. Like, I do actually find like benefit and enjoyment in it as
Yeah.
well. And I feel like you would say the same when you came to like some of my church events too. You were
Yeah.
able to appreciate in like a deeper way than if you were more of just an outsider or a visitor or didn't really understand. And I
That's true.
that like knee jerk Protestant response to certain Catholic things. It's like, oh, I know that no. I feel like that has tamed down a lot in me just because I do have that better understanding. So even just like knowing that you and I both have a respect and appreciation for the other person's beliefs helps, I think, because then when you ask me things like, well, but why do you believe this when there's like this, and this? I'm not like, oh, Jacque's trying to pick a fight.
Right. Yeah.
She thinks she like I'm stupid and that I don't know what I'm saying. Like we know it's genuinely coming from a place of I want to better understand this. This is an area I'm not understanding. I'm confused.
Yeah, and I think it takes a lot of maturity between the two people because I know I've gotten better throughout this friendship of like sitting in the disagreement and being like, we just disagree, or like having those conversations because I think where I was come from before, I never had to face or like talk with someone that genuinely like disagreed with me on Catholic belief. If they were like convicted Christians, I should say. It was like everyone that was serious about their faith was Catholic. And all I heard around me was people that agreed with me and like had all these caricatures or whatever. And so I could bring up like this one thing and be like, well, yeah, this proves them wrong. So, and so then like coming into it, being able to ask you those things and be like, oh, there's actually, they have a good reason for, or like a good response to that. Even if I don't agree with it, I see logically why they believe these things. And I just think having those conversations, I've gotten much better and become more mature of being able to have conversations where you disagree, because that is a level of maturity. Because at first it doesn't feel great to have someone say like, I disagree with this, or I think you're wrong, because first of all it kind of threatens your position and you're a little bit are like, wait, am I right? Like you question a little bit, and so you immediately could turn into like defensive mode and be like, nope, don't want to hear it, like you're wrong, I don't, you're attacking me. um so I guess it yeah, I guess we obviously had some of that maturity when we met because we were able to like become friends and have those conversations. Um, but I think I definitely grew in that over time. And I think that's been good because it's like
Oh,
in
big, me
practice of
too.
like having those conversations, you're like, oh no, it's fine. I can handle like having a conversation where we disagree. I don't have to get really upset or really emotional about it. And as you build that relationship too, you like have mutual respect for the other person. You kind of like know that they're coming into it with goodwill. So it's easier to have that conversation. Because if you're going into a conversation where you know that someone's really antagonistic or like is trying to tear you down or trying to change your mind, then that's much harder to have a constructive conversation and then like to have an actual friendship.
Or feeling like they are going to try and twist your words.
Ooh,
You and I both have like misspoken, and the other person has been, hey, I think you said that wrong, or did you mean this? We're
yeah,
not out here trying to twist each other's words or have like a gotcha, catch someone in a moment where they misspeak. I think that's super important as well. We genuinely sort of steel man the other person's argument and want to know what is your position at its like purest. No mistakes. You know what I mean? If you're going to misspeak, like then back it up. Like let's figure this out. I'm not going to
yeah,
move forward and be like, "Well, you said it. You said this, so you
yeah,
mean this." Um
yes.
and I feel like there's been even times on our podcast where one of us has like said something and the other person can anticipate people are going to interpret it this way, and we'll be like, hey, I just want to clarify what you said, and we've both done that to each other. So there's genuine like
Yeah.
goodwill also for how the other person will be understood or perceived.
Yeah. And when we misspeak, I never like assume Megan was trying to be mean or trying to, and vice versa. We don't assume that the other person is trying to tear the other person down, or yeah, because sometimes you can say things, you're like, oh, that came off way more intense or uncharitable than I meant it to. I didn't really mean it like that. And I don't assume that Megan meant it in that way. I'm trying to even think of like an example because I feel like Megan, you're pretty like sensitive about things. So it doesn't happen very
I can think of
often.
one.
Oh, really?
Not a bad one. It was the first time we were ever going to talk about like a Catholic versus Protestant thing. We were going to do our episode on Sola Scriptura, and I remember because we had a Google Doc and we were both like typing things in there, and you and I both after the fact came into each other and were like, "Yo, I was so anxious." Like I remember being stressed
Oh
the whole
yeah, yeah,
time
yeah,
because I was
yeah.
like, "Jackie's mad at me," or like I'm not like communicating well. So it wasn't necessarily like I felt like you were attacking me. I was worried that it came across that I was attacking you. And you were like, oh no, like we're both like writing down these really strong opinions. And then when we sat down to like, record the episode and like talk about it for the first time, it was very chill, very kind, very understanding. Like, okay, we're good.
We're fine. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I see. I can't really. I feel like maybe has been a couple, but I can't really think of a specific time. Like you said something where I was like, oh, that sounded mean. I don't know. Um, I don't know. But I feel like we just, even if it did in the moment, I'm like, well, I know Megan didn't really mean to attack me or is like mad at me or angry. If it happened, I can't really specifically think, but
Or maybe it was about things we were a little insecure about in our own faith. And I think that's also a big part is you and I both have grown in our own faith and our own understanding and our own knowledge as well in
yeah.
these past years. So we're more secure in our position. So we feel less defensive when someone disagrees with us. We don't feel the need to be like, I need them to understand. I need them to see my side. I need them to like agree with me. There's a security there. Where at the end of the day, I'm completely comfortable with you and I disagreeing because I know where I stand, you know where you stand. Like we are secure in our positions. We are like knowledgeable about what we believe. I think I'm just trying to even think of a time, not not that you would say anything that was like mean or something, but it would like
Oh,
hit
I
a
know
pain
one.
point, like something I'm insecure about. Like you would mention like, oh, Protestants have all these denominations, and I'd be like,
Oh
ugh, and
yeah.
I'd get defensive because it was like that was something I was insecure about or something that caused doubt in me. And it wasn't until I like actually wrestled with that on my own that when it would be brought up, I was like, whatever, it doesn't bother me anymore.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of things well, yeah, obviously I feel like I just didn't wasn't as knowledgeable, so more things could. So I can't think of a specific thing I was insecure about, but like definitely like have become more knowledgeable. And I also think we've just gotten more comfortable with the fact that like maybe there's things that we're wrong about, but like essentially we know that we both think that what we're doing is right. And it also, I don't know, we just genuinely agree that the other person is doing their best to serve Christ and is a Christian. And like nothing that either of us is doing is going to ruin our salvation or something, I guess. So I'm a little more comfortable and just kind of like, okay, well, I don't know. Yeah.
You do you.
Yeah, I guess, but because it's not totally like that, but it's like I know that Megan like loves Jesus and is doing her best to serve Jesus and do like follow her conscience basically. So, and I'm doing the same thing. So, yeah, that's like what the best that you can do. I thought
What
Megan
do
was,
you
which
feel
Megan's
like
not
are some
like,
things?
yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's not if Megan was out like doing crazy things that were totally out of character for her and like denouncing her faith and going off the rails, like I'd still be friends with her, but I'd kind of step in and be like, Megan, I'm worried. And vice versa.
What would you say, looking back, are things you've learned specifically about like ecumenical dialogue that would be good recommendations for someone who is either in that situation where they're like, I am in a relationship with someone and I want to have better ecumenical dialogue, or they just want to actually be closer with people who are of other Christian traditions and have those ecumenical conversations?
I think you need to learn to listen.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest thing because if something threatens our position or makes us uncomfortable, we can tend to just shut it down. So we like won't even listen to the other side. We will completely just shut it off. I think also seeking out not the straw man of positions, but like the actual argument itself. And don't just write something off because you heard one person say this, or like, well, I met a Protestant that thinks this, so this must be the belief, or yeah, or I know a Protestant that did this or this, so that's how they all are, or and vice versa. Like, well, I know a Catholic that did this or behaved like this, so this must be okay. I don't know. So yeah, actually seek out the best of the arguments. And I had another point and I forgot it, but even being willing to listen to podcasts that present the other position. Um, and like the best of those. Like maybe even ask the person, like, well, who are some sources that you really respect and like and feel like present your position well? And then that's what I would go and listen to. Because it would be different if I was just like gonna go listen to Protestants that have said things about Mary that Megan doesn't even really agree with, or even like historical Protestants agree with. And I'm like, that's all Protestants. That's what they think. And that's what you think too, Megan. Like, that's what you think deep down. Or just assume that when no, maybe I should go listen to uh, Gavin Ortland, who is really intelligent and presents the best of well, the best I've heard, honestly, of Protestant arguments and vice versa. Like there's a lot of really bad examples of Catholicism and Protestantism and Christianity in general on the internet, and actually looking at not the extremes of people, but the more moderate or the more level-headed, like good examples of what the position they hold actually is.
Yeah, I
And I
would
think just
totally
listening
agree with all of that.
and asking questions. Don't be afraid to listen and ask questions. Like, don't just assume, because I could have just assumed what Megan thought, or like we could have just totally ignored our differences and been like, well, I think this, and then I would have just continued to think caricatures about Megan's faith, or just assume that like she just hadn't heard the right argument, and if she did, then she would become Catholic. I don't know. But it's like, no, I actually understand her positions better, especially around sola scriptura. That's one I've come to have a better understanding of, even if I don't agree with it, that I'm like, oh, I understand how Megan thinks that, and that she's not stupid because she thinks that, or just hasn't heard the right arguments.
I would add too, instead of, if you're about to have a conversation with them, instead of telling them what they believe,
Oh,
ask them genuinely with the intention of listening and hearing them and taking them at their word. There are so many times where you and I could have come to each other and said, you believe Mary can forgive you. You believe Mary didn't need Jesus as her savior, when that would not be a productive dialogue. Instead, I can ask, if there's a rapport there, do you believe that Mary needed Jesus to save her? And that gives you an opportunity to say, actually, and explain things. And if I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to understand, ask more questions, be curious, that produces such a more productive dialogue than if it's just us telling each other what the other person thinks without taking the time to understand or actually hear the other person.
yeah. Oh, for sure. I think that makes a huge difference, not making assumptions about what the other person thinks and then not actually listening to what they're saying. And like you
I
said,
would
just
also say
assuming,
like visiting
oh, yeah, it's true.
like church with each other and things,
Yeah.
or like going to your events, you coming to my events, the times like I visited mass. I think that's huge. I
Yeah.
think you gain a better appreciation. You actually can, I feel like I understand the elements of the mass because I've been to mass with you and you were able to answer questions I had after. Whereas if I had never even experienced that, I don't know. I feel like there would be something lacking there.
Yeah, it would just be some weird thing that I go and do, and you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, I think it helps that we've actually entered into each other's lives and into each other's face without obviously going against what we believe. But I think, and just being really respectful. Like, if you were to show up to mass and be like, well, I'm going to get communion, I don't care what you say, I'd be like, Megan, um, whereas if you don't know, if you're not Catholic, you're not supposed to receive communion in a Catholic church. Or if you're not practicing, or yeah, there's a lot of different things. But obviously Megan's not Catholic, so it would just be, yeah, like we're just very respectful of each other's face. Or if I walked into Megan's church and was like, so like, what do you fun fact, Megan's old church in Chicago was in like an old Catholic church. There were like still confessionals in there, and like even some of the stained
It was
glass.
an
If I were
old
to make
Catholic
like
school, not an old Catholic
Catholic
church.
school. Okay, but there were like literally confessionals in there, and like I don't know. But if I were to go in and just be really like disparaging, or I don't know, bring up little remarks, or I don't know about, I was just thinking of something I could have said referring to the confessionals in the church or something. We just joked about it, honestly. When we went in, I think with Danielle, I was like, oh, I just walk in and like wait outside the confessional, and they're like, Jacque, there's no one gonna be there like to hear your
Those
confession.
aren't in use. You're like, oh, they're not in use, are they?
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, oh, I see Mary's over on your stained glass window. Like actually like making remarks or like disrespecting like your meeting, or I don't know. Like that would be, and people knew I was Catholic, but I wasn't. So it's like I don't have to hide that, but I don't need to be like, so what do you guys think about Mary? Or why don't you guys pray to Mary? Or I don't know. Yeah. That would be annoying if we came to each other's spaces and then we're super disrespectful. Or if we started praying a Hail Mary and Megan was like, oh, I gotta go. You're like, okay, chill.
Or being just like really overly critical. Because I'm
Yeah.
just thinking, what if I went to mass with you and then afterwards you were like, what'd you think? And I was like, I hated it. That was idolatrous. That was so terrible. I was bored out of my mind. Like, just what are some like really awful criticisms that are not productive at all? That wouldn't
Yeah.
feel good. Whereas
Yeah.
instead, I could say, wow, I really love this. I really love this. I thought this was interesting. I did not agree with that. What is with that? Like, what's going on
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
That's totally different.
That's totally different. Yeah, if I came to your church service and was like, well, I don't like this about this, or I don't know. Yeah, that would be completely different. But we both were like, this is great. Or like, and participated to the extent that we could, that wouldn't have been like disrespectful to our own faith or disrespectful to that faith, you know? So yeah, I don't know. I think it's so beneficial to be friends with people that you don't agree with. And I don't think that happens enough in our world, because we kind of it, and just naturally, not even trying, but you kind of stay like siloed in your own little group of people that agree with you, because it is just so much easier. um I don't know. Yeah, another thing I was thinking is trying to like force the other person to participate in something they don't agree with. Like if you came to something, I was like, Megan, you have to say this Hail Mary with us.
Mm.
Or like that would be really weird. Like I think when you even came over, I would be like, okay, we're gonna say, because we normally would end with a Hail Mary, like we're gonna say Our Father or like Glory be, or like a different kind of prayer, so that Megan can say it with us. But even if you didn't, like I'm not gonna be like, oh Megan, you need to say it. Or because like we could have, and you just would have like listened, and then no big deal, moved along. I don't know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm remembering a funny story. One time when I visited Mass with you, it was St. John Cantius and it was on All Saints Day. So they had a whole bunch of relics.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think that was something that you and I had even talked about much yet or like listened to videos on. It was not something I was super overly familiar with. Obviously, I like had come in contact with that sort of thing when I
Yeah.
visited Greece, and Orthodox churches were really big into relics.
Yeah.
But I just remember it was so funny because I could have easily been like, "Oh my gosh, this is disgusting. They have like a literal dead body up there. What's going on?" But instead, I was just like, "This is really interesting. Wow, like
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
going on here? Like I have so many questions." And it turned into like a really awesome day versus like, I can't be in here. I must leave."
Yeah. That would be, yeah, that would have been interesting. That was interesting. I gotta say, relics are weird. And it's really weird that Catholics that we do that. I do think it is weird. And I fully recognize that it's weird. I think it's really cool. But even some Catholics, because St. John Cantius is a pretty intense Catholic church with certain things, like having all the relics up there. Like you don't really see that in every day in any just Catholic church in the
It was
United States.
also a special mass, I assume, for All Saints Day. Like
It
that
was.
wasn't even their normal. It was overboard for them
Yeah,
even.
it was, but even like most parishes do not have that amount of relics. I'll tell you that. But also relics are weird. It's like someone's like eyelash or toenail, or like it's Catholics, we do some really weird stuff. And also, yeah, we're also willing to like poke fun. I think it's true. We're just like good humor about it. I think we can poke fun at our face or like different things about it that are like, yeah, I don't know. Because I will definitely poke fun sometimes at Catholic things that I'm very well aware are very weird from the outside, things that we
I
believe.
think that helps as well too, that
Yeah.
you're not overly sensitive about it as well. Because I remember even when we
Yeah.
were there, I was like, "Can I go up and take a picture of the foot?" And you were like, "I'm gonna take a picture of the foot too." And it was a
Yeah.
funny thing versus you being like, "Absolutely not. I cannot believe you'd ask me that." Like,
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, we make some pretty funny jokes. Like every time I would see a Protestant church, which is funny because people would be like, "Oh, that's so offensive." I was in the car with a bunch of my friends that are Catholic, and we like went past a Protestant church, and I was like, "Oh, look, it's one of Megan's pagan churches," like as a joke, and everybody in the car is like, uh, "That's like really intense." I'm like, "Oh, I say that to
would you
Megan like
say
every
that
day."
to her face?
Yeah,
I'd say worse things to her face.
yeah, I'd say worse things to her. It's because she knows it's not true that I don't really think that. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's fun, and that's also just our sense of humor, so it just kind of
Yeah.
works. Because it would be kind of rough if we couldn't joke about it at all and just be like walking on eggshells around each other about it.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, but it's cool. I'm going to Lourdes, and Megan's like, oh, I'm actually really interested to hear about your experience there. And she's not like, oh, I can't hear about that because I don't really believe that Mary intercedes for us. Like, I don't want to hear about that at all. Don't talk to
Mary
me
more
about
like a demon.
it. Right. Well, we'll find out. We will find out.
Let me know. Keep me posted.
Yeah, I will. Text Megan. It's not a demon, like you said. Just an update.
Turns
But
out was demonic.
yeah, actually I text you. I'm like,
Everyone here is possessed. It's crazy.
that would be rough. I gotta say that would be pretty rough. Yeah. So that's interesting. And we actually did an episode, if you didn't see our last episode, was us talking about our differences and views on intercessions of the saints and Mary. And I think that was a cool episode. And yeah, I'm going to Lourdes, like I said. So maybe that'll be our next episode or one of our next upcoming episodes. I can talk about my experience in Lourdes.
Yeah, and while you're gone, I'll read up on it because I am honestly not familiar with it at all.
Yeah, we've talked about Our Lady of Guadalupe. Did a whole episode on it if you wanted to listen. I had COVID and when we recorded it, so we actually were in person. We were living in the same city at that time, but I had COVID, so it was me. We were not prepared to film separately, so it was me using my cameras, my like webcam camera, and it was terrible on my laptop. So, and I'm the whole time I'm like, I just remember listening to it back and being like, oh my gosh, I was so sick. So that was fun. But yeah, I'm excited to share that, and that'll be fun. Megan, we should have I don't really know much about Megan's new church. You could share more about your church, Megan, on one of these episodes. Sure. Maybe.
It could be all the
Actually,
gossip,
we just need to have Danielle back on.
Mm-hmm.
Danielle is Megan's old mentor, or well, your old pastor's wife. That was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Megan,
well,
any
safe
last
travels.
Words? Oh, thanks. Yeah. If anyone's listening and wants me to pray for them for anything specifically on my pilgrimage, hit me up. Because I will. I'll be praying a lot. So even if you don't believe in the intercession of Mary, I'll be praying a lot. So I could just pray for you.
You'll pray to Jesus once in a while too.
Yeah. I mean, he's not, just kidding. I'm not even going to say that. He's not necessary because I can already hear the comments. I think one of the comments in our last video was like, this is something Catholics and Protestants will just never agree on. And then went to the whole Jesus is the one mediator. And I was like, I literally talked about how we do think Jesus is the one mediator, but it's fine. People like to comment before they actually listen to the episode or listen carefully to the whole episode. That's fine. Yeah.
I thought that too when I saw it. I was like, we've literally talked about this.
Like that exact verse, but that's okay. Okay, he just disagrees. That's okay. He or she. I don't remember, but
they.
Well, we've been asking if you have anything else you want us to talk about, let us know, and we will. And
should we say that's the end of season 4, and we'll pick up season 5 with talking about Lourdes?
Sure. Just letting y'all know. End of season 4. We'll be back after I went to Europe, and I've been perfectly healed of all of my ailments at Lourdes. So.
Jealous.
No, what's gonna happen? So we'll see you guys on the flip side.